the driver of the chariot is Krishna himself. And the Bhagavad Gita contains the conversation of the two. So I will have to quote some texts from the Bhagavad Gita. One day I'll visit this bronze chariot in Kurukshetra. Lord Krishna tells Arjuna what life is all about. So this is what the young Brouwer is reading. And think of a man who believes this profession of faith. O scion of Bharata, that's Arjuna, O conqueror of the foe, all living entities are born into delusion, overcome by the dualities of desire and hate. There are the images and the ugliness of the world. There is, however, a way out. Gradually, step by step, with full conviction, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence, sustained by full conviction, and thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else. There's the ego from the profession of faith. He undoubtedly will have appreciated the text. And it's indeed easy to identify Krishna with the God in the profession of faith. I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. I am the supersoul, O Arjuna, seated in the hearts of all living entities. I am the beginning, the middle, and the end of all things. Oh, wait. Go back. So my conviction is that the Bhagavad Gita confirmed the views that Brouwer deeply felt. And they corrected his ontological solipsism, because the Bhagavad Gita is not an ontologically solipsistic text. But it also complemented his views, the possibility of liberation, and a clear vision of how one can live a liberated life. That was a problem for Brouwer. All these ugly people, what should I do? Why should I live? How should I live my life? A bit like Arjuna, but differently. But Brouwer added, of course, new elements. Specific attention for the role of science and technology and language. Now, this is a list of the chapters in the Bhagavad, in Life, Art and Mysticism, as the booklet that he published in 1905 on the basis of these lectures is called. The first chapter is called The Sad World. The second chapter is called Introspection, The Fall Through the Intellect, The Reconciliation, Language, Immanent Truth, Transcendent Truth, The Liberated Life, Economics. For a very long time, this booklet led a peculiar existence because the collected works of Brouwer were published, but this is not part of it. One of the editors, Heiting, he said, no, we're not going to include that strange booklet. And indeed, it's a strange booklet, but in order to understand Brouwer, you have to read it. So let me go quickly, I won't take too much time, go through the text. This is Brouwer's view of the world. Life of mankind as a whole, from chapter 1, is an arrogant tearing up and devouring of its nest on this pure earth, messing up its mothering growth, gnawing and mutilating her, and making her rich creative power sterile until all life has been swallowed up and the human cancer has withered on the barren planet. The sickness of mind which has caused this and which has turned men into madmen, they call understanding the world. Climate change, plastic, you name it. He would have said, see, I was talking about it in 1905 already. But his view of technology and science is negative. And he addresses the reader in chapter 2. Having contemplated the sadness of this world, look into yourself. Within you there is consciousness. And then he talks about meditation. In chapter 3, he identifies the culprit. That's the intellect that causes the downfall. In his life of lust and desire, the intellect renders man the devilish service of linking two images of the imaginations as means and end. Once in the grip of desire for one thing, he's made to strive after another as a means to that end. The act aimed at the means, however, always overshoots the mark. Man's blinkered view prevents him from recognizing the sometimes very detrimental effect of such action. So you want to go there, you need something to go there, you try to get what you need, but that's already deviating a little bit from the goal. In order to get to this need, to these means, you need other means, And his idea is that you might wind up going in the opposite direction. You want the good, and you're heading towards evil. And that's what's happening according to Brouwer. This is simple analysis. Analysis indeed. Then the fourth chapter is about life after one realizes the corruptness of the world. You look on this life as the direction of your duty, and you live it as directed from within the self. In other words, you recognize that all these earthly bonds remain your inevitable karma until God releases you. No new desires will be able to deflect you from your path, and you will not wantonly increase the burden of your karma. I see here Arjuna doing what has to be done. And the same idea is present in this text. Brouwer had a very negative view on language. That's related to his inclination towards solipsism, and in particular his epistemological solipsism. He viewed language as a very, very imperfect means to reach the mind of someone else. Actually, he felt that is impossible. And mathematics, of course, could not be based, we'll get to that, on language, on something as imperfect as that. Well, of course, philosophers and metaphysicians, they're fond of language, they do all kinds of things with this, but this is not Brouwer's ideal world. And in the end, he answers the question of possibility of true communication with no. Then there is a chapter on immanent truth. He discusses art. Art, which is real truth, belies common sense, causality, and science everywhere. It sees the avenging of fate in everyone's life, how the illusion, the hope, and the trust in the stability of this world is turned into misery. He views the right kind of art as positive, because it reveals the situation we're in. And then he starts quoting the Bhagavad Gita. The truth, he calls it transcendent truth, that is the truth that guides a man to a life free from the shackles of fear and desire. And then he quotes the Bhagavad Gita. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. That is the idea. You're aware of the situation you're in, and then you can do what you have to do. A person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects, and that he is aloof from them. There's Brouwer's ego from the beginning, and an explanation of this world of images. Well, now we get to mathematics. The profession of faith and life, art, and mysticism are indeed the background of his views on mathematics. Well, he did not only read the Bhagavad Gita, he also read Western philosophers, and my personal idea is that he in particular read Schopenhauer, also a German idealistic philosopher, also one who was interested in Vedic texts in the Bhagavad Gita. Maybe he got to the Bhagavad Gita via Schopenhauer, but in these German idealists, they have the idea that reality is, to a large extent, a construction of the human mind. Space and time, in particular, are constructed by the human mind. That idea returns in the case of Brouwer. However, at the time of Kant, there was no non-Euclidean geometry. There was only one geometry, the theory of the space, the one and only space. And then in the 19th century, as we've seen yesterday, non-Euclidean geometries were discovered. So Brouwer could not simply take the ideas of Kant and Schopenhauer. He had to adjust them, and he realized, and that's actually a simplification, he realized that all he needed was time. And his conclusion was that when the human mind constructs our experience of reality, the primordial intuition of time plays the crucial role. There is a moment, there is a second moment, at which we still remember the moment before it. Henk Barendrecht referred to this yesterday. This is very fundamental. It's actually the beginning of not only pure mathematics, but also of how we view reality. Causality is based on it. Something's happening is always followed by something else. So there is the beginning of a natural law in nature. So his idea is that causality and space can both be understood starting from this fundamental intuition of time, and starting from this intuition, all of mathematics can be introspectively constructed. The natural numbers, the continuum, the geometries, etc. So for Brouwer, mathematics is introspective mental construction, and it has its basis in his philosophical views. He rejects language as a possibility, so he rejects formalism. And he also rejects logicism, because logic from Brouwer's point of view is based on the discovery of regularities in the way we use language. So there's language again, and it cannot be used as a basis for mathematics. So my point is, his intuitionism follows from his philosophical views. It all starts to make sense. This is a sketch of, I might skip it. The point is, these ideas stay with Brouwer till the end of his life. In 1928, at the bottom, he gives a lecture in Vienna, Mathematics, Science and Language, and there he does not elaborate very much on God or the ego and things like that. The mystical element is absent, but what is clearly present is the primordial intuition of time, how it leads to mathematics, how it leads to science. What is also very, very present there is the will, and that's one of the reasons why I believe that he was, to a large extent, influenced by Schopenhauer. He views language actually as something that mankind invented to impose one's will on someone else. That's the function of language. Well, very often, of course, we talk to somebody because we want him to do something for us, or we want him to move in a certain direction. So there is, it's not ridiculous at all. There you see Brouwer. Well, he was a vegetarian. He liked to sit in this cross-legged pose. He slept outside often. By the way, he was a very difficult man to live with. He was very sensitive, easily hurt. There's an anecdote of him with another topologist, De Groot, a Dutchman. De Groot had a Mercedes two-seater. He liked spectacular cars. And he took Brouwer from Amsterdam to the village in which I happen to live, but Brouwer lived close by, and the other topologists lived there too, in the two-seater. And then Brouwer started to to mention all the people he had an argument with. At the end, he had named the whole world of some significance, and then he said, by the way, you and I also still have a problem. Then De Groot stopped the car and said, would you like to walk to Laren? So it illustrates the guy. He had a very negative opinion. I skipped that negative opinion of women, but he was fond of women. Peculiar man. Actually, in Life, Art and Mysticism, there are terrible pages on women. I will skip that. It's really nonsense. You can understand Brouwer without accepting these pages. Now, the interesting thing for me is that these ideas stayed with him till the end of his life. Because in 1948, at the International Congress of Philosophy, there were many famous philosophers. He gave a talk called Consciousness, Philosophy and Mathematics. And that was a peculiar talk. They published the talk in some sort of appendix to the proceedings, which is strange because they had a section on philosophy of mathematics. It's sort of an indication that the organizer thought this is a peculiar talk. Let's put it in the appendix. Here, that is Brouwer lecturing, dressed in white. The first sentence. First of all, an account should be rendered of the phases consciousness had to pass through in its transition from its deepest home to the exterior world in which we cooperate and seek mutual understanding. This account does not imply mutual understanding and in some way may remain a soliloquy. The same can be said of some other parts of the lecture too. So this is Brouwer talking to himself, knowing that they won't understand him because communication is actually quite a complicated thing and possibly even impossible. How does he continue? Consciousness in its deepest home seems to oscillate slowly, willlessly and reversibly between stillness and sensation. The initial phenomenon is a move of time. By a move of time, a present sensation gives way to another present sensation in such a way that consciousness retains the former as a past sensation, and moreover, through this distinction between present and past, recedes from both and from stillness and becomes mind. There is this element of time again as the initial element. Once the consciousness has become mind, it creates causal sequences. Some iterative complexes of sensations get estranged from the subject. This leads to the exterior world for the subject, and then follow the mathematical acts which we use when we use the causal sequences to change the world. Finally, by means of language, we transfer our will from individual to individual. So in a very condensed way, he again told what he believed. Of course, I do not really understand how well, I sort of have an understanding, but I do not really understand how he viewed this construction of reality by the human mind. Of course, the human mind and what you think has an extreme influence on how you experience the world. But completely as a construction by the human mind, I find that a strange thing to accept. But this is what Brouwer thought about it. Come on. Oh yeah, on solipsism. That's still the 1948 lecture. In default of the plurality of mind, there is no exchange of thought either. Thoughts are inseparably bound up with the subject. And by so-called exchange of thought with another being, the subject only touches the outer wall of the automaton. This can hardly be called mutual understanding. Only through the sensation of other's soul, sometimes a deeper approach is experienced. And when wisdom revealed the beauty of this sensation, find expression in the antiphony of words exchanged, then there may be mutual understanding. Apart from the soul, every expose on the sense and the essence of life is a soliloquy. This is his English. It was a lecture in English. And then Brouwer returns to the question whether we meet wisdom and truth in the transition from pure consciousness to the world as we experience it now. While discussing wisdom, he quotes the Bhagavad Gita. One who is not envious, but is a kind of friend to all living entities, who does not think himself a proprietor and is free from false ego, who is equal in both happiness and distress, who is tolerant, always satisfied, self-controlled, and engaged in devotional service with determination, his mind and intelligence fixed on me, such a devotee of mine is very dear to me. Yeah, this is remarkable. Frits Staal is a Dutch, he was at Berkeley, is a Dutch expert on, among others, Sanskrit. And he was present when Brouwer gave this talk in 1948. And he wrote later, Brouwer included in his talk a long quotation from the Bhagavad Gita, torn out of its natural context and placed in a new and totally unintelligible environment. He had been warned at the beginning of the lecture when Brouwer said that his talk might become a soliloquy, of course. My conclusion, Brouwer was a brilliant mind in search of beauty, mutual understanding, wisdom and truth, while locked up in a confusing, messy and often ugly universe. By the way, he definitely saw his mathematics. He was not interested in the applications. He saw his mathematics as a form of art. That's how he could do it within his view of the world. He tried to understand la condition humaine, the human condition, and he found the answers in the solipsistic mix of Schopenhauerian philosophy and mystical religious thought. In Schopenhauer's work and the Bhagavad Gita, he found truth and wisdom. And it's obvious that Schopenhauer's spirit and the Bhagavad Gita accompanied him his entire life. They say about Schopenhauer that he had a copy of the Bhagavad Gita on the table next to his bed. Well, maybe Brouwer had a copy there too. I'm not sure, but it's quite possible. He found truth and beauty in his mathematics, which consisted for him of introspective constructions. Later, of course, intuitionism was phrased in language, intuitionistic logic exists, etc. That's not really Brouwer's intuitionistic mathematics, but he liked fame. He was, after all, a human being too, so he will have liked it, I guess. As for, mutual understanding, that remained a problem for him during his entire life. I guess it's the end. Yes, I thank you very much. And the guy with the bell didn't show up.
Thank you so much, sir. If anyone having any question, then they can raise their hands up and they can ask. Any questions?
You don't have to ask any questions. Yes, the microphone. I'm never offended when I get no questions.
Please.
More than the question, it's a compliment actually I want to give. Thank you very, very much, Professor Koetsier, for a wonderful lecture and for bringing a good understanding of Brouwer's work over his lifetime. That how through mathematics, he initially found it's a bit incomplete in the sense that he was not able to see beyond introspection. And for mutual understanding, he didn't have a proper solution through mathematics.
That's true.
And then that's when he went and approached a different philosophical path. And through Bhagavad Gita, he found the complete understanding. And that's how he laid his life for the, till time he lived. So it's very good because, this is the, you brought a big, I would say, connection between the mathematics and reality, which is the theme of the talk, of the seminar. So I really want to compliment. But I also wanted to ask you whether Brouwer, in his work, ever realized God? Did he understand the origin of life, from how the life came? Because you touched upon karma, so did he find some realization from his work about what karma is about and how it works and how it acts? So if you have some idea about that, you may just share that.
No. He uses the word karma repeatedly, but he never defines it. And the context is always that there is inevitability. You have to accept the situation you're in. But he doesn't elaborate on it at all. So, sorry.
Okay. Thanks a lot once again.
Well, thank you for the compliment.
Thank you very much, sir, for the wonderful question and compliments. Anyone else want to raise and ask, please? Yeah. Check.
Good morning, Professor. Thanks for the talk. So I have one question. You said that Brouwer was a solipsist. He thought that his ideas were the ultimate truth. Then why did he go on to read other German philosophers' work and implement them in his own theories? Or am I flawed in my understanding of what an etymological solipsist actually means?
You want to know what an...
No, you said that Brouwer was a
I use these terms, epistemological
yeah,
solipsist.
you said he was a solipsist, right? Then, and solipsist pretty much means that his ideas were the ultimate truth. Then why did he go on to read other philosophers' work and implement them in his own own work?
That's precisely the problem with ontological solipsism. Well, in his profession of faith, he is an ontological solipsist because he explicitly says that other people are images in this mental theater of his. So they possess an inferior existence. Now this does not return later on. And although he never explicitly, but he didn't like to change his mind actually, but he never explicitly said so, it is very obvious that he rejected later this ontological solipsism. I have no other explanation for what he wrote and his behavior. Because, of course, the question you're posing is absolutely correct for an ontological solipsist. Why would he engage in this communication? The whole of reality becomes an absurd event in which you are participating. Why would you? No, his positive opinion about the Bhagavad Gita and everything else he says with respect to his ideas about mathematics, etc., they show to me that he rejected ontological solipsism in the course of time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you, Professor, for the wonderful talk. Frankly speaking, this is one talk where we were connected to the talk because mathematics was totally ruling in the first two lectures. But in this lecture, we had some mathematics and some devotional these things also. I really appreciate for the way we have presented the thing. We are with the talk when you are going. I want to go for the one question what I had. In the conclusions, you have mentioned that this person is, you go to conclusions, he said that he is intuition constructionism.
Yes?
Yeah. Then in the last sentence you have mentioned that it created some problems for him.
But, would you repeat that sentence?
It has led to some types of problems for whatever person you are speaking.
But with Hilbert, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
Why, after having such a knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, when he is able to understand the principles of these great scriptures, when he has good amount of intuition, constructionism, whenever we have constructions, it leads to positive things. Why it has led to some type of problems for this person?
You want me to explain the conflict between Brouwer and Hilbert?
Yes.
Well, Brouwer had become very famous with his topological theorems. And actually, they are not strictly constructivist. And Brouwer knew it, but he figured that he later, in some later phase, would be able to give acceptable constructivist proofs. That's what he thought. Some have said that he was a little bit of an opportunist, that he wanted to become famous